On the 29th of August 2007, at the height of the Celtic Tiger boom, Ireland's National Planning Board signed off on a second terminal for Dublin Airport. Buried in the paperwork was a single condition: a ceiling of 32 million passengers a year, written while the M50 motorway outside sat choked between two lanes and a barrier toll plaza. The number sat 39% above the traffic the airport actually carried. Nobody marched against it. Nobody celebrated it. The Irish Times would later call it a barely noticed footnote in the planning conditions. Nobody who read that footnote in 2007 could have predicted what it would go on to do. Within 19 years, that footnote would be investigated by a county council, suspended by a high court, argued over at the European Union's highest court, and folded into a trade complaint in Washington, where the United States government was asked to punish Irish airlines because of it. For as long as modern aviation has existed, planning conditions have been treated as routine paperwork. Airports outgrow them, reapply, and move on. That is how the system is supposed to work. This condition refused to move, pinned to the busiest airport in Ireland. But here's what nobody anticipated: every attempt to get around it would fail, every single one, for 19 straight years. In 2025, Dublin Airport handled 36.4 million passengers against a legal limit of 32, an open breach 4.4 million over. This summer, Ireland's Parliament passed an entire act of law for one purpose: to make it possible to delete the sentence. The condition wasn't written about noise. It wasn't written about climate. The reason recorded against it at the time was traffic on the roads outside. So how does one paragraph of planning text go undefeated against an airport, a regulator, and a government for nearly 2 decades? The answer runs through 2 countries, 3 courts, 1 wrecked executive career, and a nearly identical war fought at the same time in Amsterdam. To understand how the paragraph got written, you need to understand Dublin in 2007. The Celtic Tiger economy was roaring. The M50, the motorway ringing the city, was choking, 2 lanes each way, with a barrier toll plaza that backed traffic up for miles. Dublin Airport moved just over 23 million passengers that year, and the local development plan adopted by Fingal County Council in 2006 expected the number to keep climbing to 38 million by 2025. That plan envisaged 3 terminals. Growth beyond 30 million would be handled by a Terminal 3 on the airport's western side. The new Terminal 2 came first. When An Bord Pleanala granted permission for it on the 29th of August 2007, it refused the terminal's second phase outright because the surrounding road infrastructure wasn't ready, and it capped the combined capacity of Terminal 1 and Terminal 2 at 32 million passengers per year. The same ceiling was written into the Terminal 1 extension permission 5 months later. On the 10th of January 2008, the number sat 39% above the traffic the airport actually carried. Nobody marched against it. Nobody celebrated it. The Irish Times would later describe it as a barely noticed footnote in the planning conditions. Years afterward, the head of Ireland's aviation regulator would tell Parliament the road story was wrong anyway, that the cap was really designed to steer growth toward that 3rd terminal on the western campus. The terminal was never built. The number became law regardless, a footnote with a fuse. By 2010, the problem the footnote supposedly addressed had disappeared. Barrier-free tolling arrived on the M50 on the 30th of August 2008, 1 year and 1 day after the permission was granted. The 3rd lane was finished by 2010. The road unclogged. The conditions stayed exactly where it was, and nobody went back to look at it. Terminal 2 opened on the 19th of November 2010, a €600 million 3-story curvilinear building with 58 check-in desks, opened by Taoiseach Brian Cowan. At its peak, it was the largest construction project in the Irish state, with 2,600 workers on site and more than 10,400 people employed across 3 years of building. Ryanair's Michael O'Leary dismissed it as an unnecessary Taj Mahal. He would spend the next 15 years fighting to free it. Terminal 2 could process up to 15 million passengers a year on its own, which meant the airport's physical plant could handle roughly 35 million from the day the doors opened. The concrete could do 35. The law said 32. At the time, the gap looked academic. Later, it would become an international incident. The condition contained its own exit. The combined capacity could exceed 32 million if a further grant of planning permission authorized it. The front door, deliberately built in, requiring a a fresh environmental assessment at the new scale. The airport's operator, DAA, spent a decade trying almost every other door instead. In 2018, according to records later cited to the Irish Parliament, DAA asked the planning board to insert the words origin destination before passengers, a two-word edit that would have excluded connecting travellers from the count and quietly raised the effective ceiling. Refused, 1-0 to the condition. In 2019, DAA raised the question of whether exceeding 32 million even counted as development under planning law at all. Dismissed, 2-0. Meanwhile, the traffic kept coming. In 2023, Dublin Airport handled 31,908,471 passengers, within 92,000 of the limit. In December 2023, DAA finally approached the front door, lodging a colossal infrastructure application with Fingal County Council, 11 separate projects, a 15-year permission, 2.4 billion euros of investment, and a cap raised from 32 to 40 million. A year later, with that application still grinding through the system, DAA filed a faster no-build request to lift the cap to 36 million with no construction attached. Fingal's planners confirmed its validity on the 23rd of December, confirmed it again on the 6th of January, and then declared it invalid on the 14th of January 2025. DAA called the reversal a bizarre flip-flop and said it was baffled and bewildered. 3-0. But here's the detail everyone had missed. The flaw buried inside the condition for 17 years. It had no enforcer. DAA couldn't comply with it even if it wanted to. The company didn't control passenger numbers. Fingal County Council could write letters, but planning enforcement moves in years, not seasons. The condition was a ceiling with nobody holding it up. Traffic passed 30 million, approached 32, and no mechanism existed anywhere in the Irish system to actually stop the next passenger walking through the door. The cap had never truly been tested because no institution had ever converted it into an instruction an airline had to obey. On the 7th of October 2024, it found its enforcer, the Irish Aviation Authority, the slot coordinator, the body that decides which aircraft get to take off and land, translated the planning condition directly into airline schedules for the first time, capping summer 2025 at 25.2 million seats with a winter limit of 14.4 million. The consequences landed immediately. Airlines were warned there would be no extra slots for Christmas flights, rugby internationals, or Premier League travel. Ryanair announced that Leinster Rugby would have to fly to 4 away games out of Belfast instead of Dublin. O'Leary declared that the bogus cap would let him make a fortune that Christmas on fares reported as high as $1,080, while campaigning furiously to abolish the thing making him the money. The lawsuits followed within weeks, and the list of plaintiffs was extraordinary. Aer Lingus, Ryanair, Airlines for America, Delta, JetBlue, United, Emerald Airlines, and DAA itself. A state-owned airport company was suing the state's own aviation regulator alongside its customers over a condition attached to its own planning permission. In November 2024, the High Court's Mr. Justice Barry O'Donnell found the legal questions had never been addressed anywhere. In 3 decades, the EU's slot regulation had never once been interpreted by the European Court of Justice. On the 11th of December 2024, he referred 3 questions to Luxembourg and stayed the seat cap, ruling that the consequences of a planning breach did not outweigh the very serious harm of enforcing it. The stay was the only ground the condition ever gave up, and it was provisional pending Europe's answer. The airlines had a reason to feel confident about that answer. They had run this exact play before in Amsterdam and won. In the summer of 2022, the Dutch government announced it would cut Amsterdam Schiphol from a maximum of 500,000 flights a year to 440,000, in search of what Infrastructure Minister Mark Harbers called a new equilibrium. Schiphol, he said, would no longer be a cheap transfer island between other airports. The industry mobilized. KLM and IATA sued, joined by Delta, United, JetBlue, FedEx, British Airways, Lufthansa, and EasyJet. The District Court of Noord-Holland blocked the cut on the 5th of April 2023 for skipping required procedure. The Amsterdam Appeal Court reversed that on the 7th of July. The cuts began to bite in slot allocations. 84 airlines told to shed 3.1% of their holdings, 9,070 slots in total, of which KLM alone would surrender 4,847. Washington ended it. On the 2nd of November 2023, the US Department of Transportation formally found the cuts violated the US-EU Air Transport Agreement and ordered KLM, Martinair and TUI Fly Netherlands to refile every one of their US schedules within 7 days for reconsideration. 12 days later, the Dutch government folded. KLM called the retreat an important step to prevent retaliation. Schiphol Airport itself, the supposed beneficiary of the airline's victory, said it was disappointed because local residents were getting the short end of the stick. The Dutch government went back and started again by the book this time. The lawful flight cap it eventually produced would survive exactly 4 months and 10 days. By 2025, the pressure in Dublin had turned personal. On the 20th of June, Fingal County Council issued a formal enforcement notice against DAA for breaching the cap, giving the company 2 years to comply. DAA called the notice a sorry indictment of the mess that is the Irish planning system. The year closed 4.4 million passengers above the limit, a record, while the man fronting the fight was consumed by a second war entirely, a boardroom battle over roughly 20 complaints that had nothing to do with the cap. Kenny Jacobs, 3 years into a 7-year term, was told on the 15th of December 2025 that he was being suspended. The same day, his board appointed Nick Cole to a deputy chief executive post that had never existed in the authority's 80-year history. Jacobs sued in the High Court in January, calling the process predetermined and tainted by bias. On the 5th of February 2026, minutes before the hearing, he settled for roughly €480,000, half the €960,000 exit deal ministers had vetoed weeks earlier, and voluntarily stepped down. 5 days later, on the 10th of February, the Irish Cabinet approved the Dublin Airport Passenger Capacity Bill, giving the Transport Minister power to amend or revoke the condition by order. 2 days after that, on the 12th, Luxembourg spoke. Advocate General Campos Sanchez Bordona delivered his opinion in the case the airlines themselves had built. An annual passenger limit imposed by a planning authority may be taken into account when allocating slots. The 32 million cap could count as an operating constraint. Historic slots, he added, are not property rights, merely authorization to use airport infrastructure. 4-0. The airlines were winning everywhere except in the court they had chosen, and Airlines for America, which had already asked Washington in January to curtail Irish carriers' access to American airports, now lobbied openly for Ireland to pass the bill before the end of April so the Irish High Court could withdraw its reference before Europe's judges delivered a binding ruling. But here's the twist: both wars ended in the same season, in opposite ways, and neither side won either of them. The Dutch had done everything their Supreme Court demanded on the 12th of July 2024, the full balanced approach procedure, a European Commission decision on the 5th of March 2025, a formal decree of 478,000 flights and 27,000 night movements, effective the 1st of November 2025. On the 11th of March 2026, 4 months and 10 days later, the Dutch Council of State annulled it. The minister, the court found, had not carefully drafted the decree and had not shown that fewer flights meant less noise, since not every aircraft is equally loud. The annulment reinstated the previous decree from 2008, which contains no annual flight limit at all. After 4 years of fighting, Schiphol currently has no numerical cap. The night flight limit survived only because no party had objected to that part, an accident of pleading, not a judgment. Airlines, residents, Amsterdam City Hall and the surrounding municipalities had all appealed the same decree for opposite reasons, and all of them lost. Environmental groups now argue the reinstated 2008 rules may imply something closer to 400,000 flights. The airlines may have litigated their way into a stricter regime than the one they defeated. In Dublin, the ending came by vote instead of verdict. The dial passed the bill 118 to 28 on the 30th 30th of June, the Sianad followed 31-11, and President Catherine Connolly signed it into law on the 16th of July 2026. The Act does not lift the cap. It gives the minister the power to do so by order, after environmental assessments that push actual removal into late 2026 or 2027, and it exempts itself from Ireland's primary climate legislation, an exemption flagged by the Parliament's own researchers inside a bill that describes its purpose as sustainable development. A residence company from St Margaret's the Ward, the community under the flight path, was already in the High Court seeking an injunction to force DAA to obey the cap. So, after 19 years, who actually won? The condition did. It retired undefeated. 4 wins, no losses on the merits. Its one concession a provisional stay. Its legal standing endorsed by the advisor to Europe's highest court. The only way anyone found to beat the paragraph was to change the rules of the game it was playing. Every institution in this story answers to the same owner. The Irish state wrote the condition through its planning board. The Irish state breached it through its airport company. The Irish state enforced it through its county council, suspended it through its high court, defended it through its aviation regulator. And when the advisor to Europe's top court prepared to vindicate it, the Irish state changed the law, exempted the change from its own climate legislation, and left the residents of St Margaret's the Ward holding a 19-year-old promise that every other arm of the government that made it had spent 2 decades fighting over. The Dutch state, given the same problem, wrote its promise more carefully, followed every procedure, and watched its own highest court delete it anyway. The European Court's final judgment is still pending. The residence injunction is still live. The sentence written in August 2007 is, as of today, still technically the law, and there is one detail hiding in plain sight at the center of it all. Terminal 2, the building whose permission carried the cap, the building at the heart of a 2-decade war that began with a road, was built with an approach road running directly underneath it, bisecting the structure. The architects called that road one of the cleverest pieces of the design. Every passenger who ever walked through the terminal was standing on top of the problem. Click here to check out another video.